Although not much media attention here in the US has been put into it, the situation in Belarus has been developing quickly over the past couple of weeks. And I personally am very excited to learn more about what's happening there and what the future is likely to hold. And so we are very happy to have joining us on the show, writer, editor, and analyst Natalia Antonova. Welcome to the Damage Report.
Thank you.
Glad to have you on. So we know that there are these massive protests that are going on. The opposition leader, following the contested results of this most recent election, has fled. That's pretty much my level of knowledge about it. So for those who might not know much about Belarus or its history with Russia, the current state of their government, what's basically been going on over the past few weeks?
Well, Belarus has been ruled by the same person for 26 years. Since 1994, Alexander Lukashenko has been in power there. So that's longer than Putin, of course. We tend to think of Putin as this big dictator, authoritarian guy, but Lukashenko arguably has him beat. And finally, I think that a lot of stuff just happened to boil over this year with the 2020 election. Basically, Lukashenko is known for jailing his opponents, for having political prisoners, doing all the usual textbook authoritarian stuff. But this year, you have a pandemic on your hands. You have people who are scared and frustrated, and Lukashenko has been extremely, how shall I put it diplomatically, skeptical of the pandemic and of the dangers of the virus, even though his own population is in fact very scared. There's also the fact that inequality actually has been rising sharply in Belarus since about 2014, which is also impacting the current situation. And then what ended up happening is that Lukashenko once again jailed a political opponent who wanted to run against him in the 2020 election. And the guy's wife stepped up, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. She just said, I love my husband and I'm going to do this for him. I'm going to run against this guy. And she actually gained a lot of support. People in Belarus, it's a bit more of a conservative country, but people were really energized by this young woman stepping up and saying that she wanted to do it. And it would seem that what ended up happening is that she was getting too many votes for comfort. So there were crude violations of the electoral process. It was just so out in the open. And
so when you just out of curiosity, so when you say that, I mean, we have an idea stateside about the ways that elections can be manipulated. You're calling this crude. It goes obviously beyond that. What are some of the forms that it came in?
Well, for example, people were trying to mark their ballots in a certain way when they were putting them in the ballot boxes. So they would fold them a certain way to show that they had voted for Tikhanovskaya, like her supporters were doing this. And you would see all these ballot boxes stuffed with these ballots that are stuffed in a certain way. And then somebody comes out and says, oh, well, actually, out of all these votes, Lukashenko won like 90% or 80% or something like that. You had people climbing out of windows, hiding ballot boxes and hiding equipment and being very shady. And of course, there were no monitors allowed whatsoever. And in general, the fact that he said, well, the official polling numbers said that it was something like 80% for Lukashenko, and then maybe I think it was around 9% for Tikhanovskaya. It was just so galling what they were doing that it really, really boiled over.
And so, yeah, and I saw that there had been, an international response implying that her suspicions were shared by, election monitors and experts and all of that. Is there any way to know what the people actually think? Are there any credible polls that could give us some idea of what the levels of support actually are?
We don't have those. We don't have credible polls. We have some polls with extreme selection bias, people who are able to get online. There's some Telegram polling going on. So people who were using Telegram obviously are more connected to the world. They tend to be younger, and those people clearly show that they were voting for Tikhanovskaya. Unfortunately, at this point, this is why I don't like the responses of some European politicians who are saying, well, we need to make sure that every vote is counted. No. You have to start over at this point. You have to do a whole new election just to find out what's really going on. But of course, with the current situation and with Putin ostensibly backing Lukashenko, that's going to be very hard to do.
Yeah, is there any chance of that actually happening? I mean, I know that there are these massive protests. They're apparently in it for the long haul, although Lukashenko has apparently said that within a couple of days they're going to be crushed. So what do you think the odds are that there would be a follow-up election?
I have no idea what's going to happen right now. I think that's the scary part, and also the potentially exciting part, because I think everybody has kind of given up on Belarus, and we just didn't think that anything was going to change there anytime soon. But it has definitely boiled over. It has definitely reached a crisis. Right now, we're seeing the protest activity slowly going down, just because people are very tired. People are scared. There have been a lot of torture allegations associated with what's going on. We've seen Russian journalists get dragged off the street and tortured for 16 hours and having to be freed by their own diplomats. So this is like a very serious issue. They're even going after Russians, which is ostensibly a very friendly country. Mm-hmm. So based on that, we don't know what's going to happen. We do know that one weapon against Lukashenko, one potentially powerful weapon that the people have, are strikes. And we are seeing some strikes. Of course, strikes are technically illegal in Belarus, which is why people who think it's a socialist paradise really need to wake up. It is not. No socialist paradise exists where strikes are illegal. I'm sorry, it's just how it is. So I don't know. I don't want to make any predictions, but it does seem like this is very unprecedented for the regime, and it does seem that he's genuinely shaken by this. And whether or not he realizes that he should go, or whether or not he's going to get backed into a corner and lashed out, we can't tell right now. I mean, people who rule for that amount of time, 26 years in power, unopposed, they tend to lose touch with reality a little bit. So I don't know if he's necessarily going to be making good decisions for himself and for his government at this time.
To that end, not to focus too much on the pandemic, but we have down that he apparently suggested that you could combat the disease with vodka, saunas, and hard work. So perhaps a bit disconnected from reality, a bit.
And he also plays into this image of a clown, because Lukashenko is somebody who was in charge of a collective farm back in the day. So people expect these kind of, folksy pseudo jokes, pseudo not jokes from him. And I think he was really playing into that image. But as we saw with the pandemic, his people, I think, were taking it a little bit more seriously than he was. And I think that's where part of the disconnect came. They were just like, who's flying this plane right now? This guy is not taking a very serious public health crisis seriously at all.
So you have the protests, obviously, as you've made clear. Putin is supporting the continued rule of Lukashenko into a third decade and beyond. It seems pretty clear that China has staked out where they see this thing going. The US has said that they have concerns about the way that the election was run, and based on domestically what they're doing here in advance of their reelection. I find that to be a little bit funny, but are they actually going to do anything? Is there going to be diplomatic pressure? Is the UN going to get involved? Or is this effectively you've got the people in the streets, let's see what happens sort of situation?
I don't know. I think everybody's waiting to see what happens. I do think that the support that Putin has for Lukashenko is not unconditional. We can't call it that. I think if they see the throne underneath them wobbling quite forcefully, they might go with plan B or plan C or whatever plans they have. I mean, they've always got those plans, right? And I'm also, in order to understand this relationship, we have to understand that Putin is also not some like magnificent chess player. He does act out impulsively at times, as we have seen before. So that situation is a complete unknown right now, I would say. And as for what everybody else is going to do, that's an unknown too. I think that right now in the United States, we're facing such a big crisis of our own that it's very hard for people to focus on what's happening in Belarus. Yeah. But I do think it's important to pay attention, because here's the thing: Lukashenko is a guy who's acting a bit like a cornered rat right now, and we potentially have our own cornered rat in the White House in the face of Donald J. Trump. So if you look at that kind of erratic behavior that he's engaged in, perhaps Americans might want to look to November and say, well, are there going to be any similarities? And for the record, I don't think that Donald Trump is a dictator. I mean, that's a silly thing to say. He was in fact elected to office, and let's be clear about it. It's two different issues. But the mentality and some of the way that these people behave, the mentality does offer us some clues and some parallels that we should definitely be paying close attention to.
Yeah. So the last question I want to ask you is about one aspect of how the future might develop. So you talked about how the main opposition leader was initially jailed, and then his wife took up sort of the call and was received quite well by the opposition. So she's fled the country. She's been in Lithuania, correct?
Yes.
And so from what I have been reading, it is fairly clear from communications that she's put out that it seems to be based on what day it is, saying that the protests need to continue, need to stay strong and all of that, but then also putting out some messaging that seems to indicate that there might be some pressure being put on her behind the scenes in terms of people that are still in Belarus potentially being at risk. Does that seem like a fair assessment of what might be going on?
Yes, well, she was actually forced to record an actual hostage video before she had to leave the country. And I think she was actually thrown out, not so much fled. Her husband is behind bars. Obviously, he's a hostage as well. And I also think that based on her initial reaction video that she posted right after she was safe, right after she was in Lithuania, she offered a very major clue. She said, children are everything we have. Now, when somebody says that, what they mean is that their children are under threat. Her children had previously been taken to Lithuania before the election happened for their own safety. But I think what she might have been told is that, look, borders are porous. The world is a crazy place. If your children wind up dead or kidnapped or whatever, who's to say you're not going to be to blame for your, for your activities? This is what these people do. You have to look at the assassinations that the Putin regime conducts on European soil in the EU. And this has happened over and over and over again. So I do believe that she must have had some genuine concerns, both for her husband and for the kids. Yeah. And I think that those concerns are still there, which is why this situation is so terrifying. And it's why it deserves a closer look.
Well, and of course, I'm assuming it is disconnected, but you're the expert. Feel free to let me know what you think. But it was just within the last 48 hours that Russian opposition figure Alexei Navalny was poisoned, or at least the news was that he was poisoned yet again. And that's happened constantly. I think the one time that I interviewed him, it was not that long after another poisoning attempt. So if you are an opposition figure in conflict with one of the people that Putin supports right now, that sort of news, I assume, has to be something that you're considering.
Absolutely, and we have to make room for the fact that Russia, it has kind of like a middle manager syndrome in a way. There's all these people who are trying to curry favor with Putin, and it's entirely possible that somebody was looking at the situation in Belarus and was thinking, I could please my master if I potentially poison this guy. Now, this situation with Navalny, this is the most serious one yet. He's been, I don't know if he was actually ever poisoned before. I know that his face was sprayed with chemicals and he's been attacked, but this is like, this guy is now in a coma. Mm-hmm. And there's all this activity around the hospital and they had to fight to let him be taken out of the country, taken to a safer place, to Germany. So all of that, it might be that the timing is completely random. I don't entirely think so. I think that there is this sense that somebody must have looked at Belarus and gone, you know what, these people in Russia, they might be looking to Belarus and they might be getting some ideas. So why don't we just, show them that they should not be getting these ideas about protests? Now, was this specifically ordered by Putin? I don't think so. I don't think that's the thing about this guy, Putin. He doesn't really have to say, kill that dude most of the time, right? He doesn't have to say it. It's all about, it's kind of like ruling by signal. That's his preferred method. There's plausible deniability. And there's also the fact that he knows that his vassals, it really truly is a kind of feudal system that they have there. And his vassals will do his dirty work for him most of the time. So did he order it? I doubt it. But is the timing suspicious? Absolutely.
Interesting. Well, look, we certainly appreciate you joining us and lending your expertise on the topic. It's a complex one and consequential, and it looks like the future is going to be pretty important for what happens in that country. Perhaps at some point in the near future, we can touch base once again as things continue to develop.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Natalia Antonova, thank you once again.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.